The Harrington estate glistened under the soft gold of sunset. Expensive cars lined the driveway, the fountains sparkled, and the marble floors reflected a life many only dreamed of. Yet beneath the polished surface, there was a hollowness that even the grand chandeliers couldn't brighten. Clarissa Harrington sat poolside, her designer sunglasses shielding more than just the sunlight. They hid the constant discontent in her eyes. Her father was busy closing another business deal, her mother was away at a resort, and the house staff moved like shadows in her world. "Ethan," she called lazily, waving her manicured hand. The family's driver stepped forward, always poised, always ready. "Yes, Miss Clarissa." "Be ready in 10. I am meeting my friends," she said, without as much as a glance at him. "Yes, miss," he replied, his tone even, his patience endless. Ethan had served the family for years, reliable, quiet, often invisible. He saw their triumphs and their faults, especially hers. The argument with her father had been the breaking point that night. He had criticized her choices, called her reckless, and reminded her that the family name was not a toy. "You always see the worst in me," she had yelled before slamming the door behind her. In the driveway, Ethan waited as usual. "Rough evening, miss?" he asked, his voice low. She turned on him sharply. "Don't start with me, too." "I only want you safe," he said gently. "The world isn't always kind to people who draw too much attention." The words struck her pride like a blade. Hours later, sitting in her room, her anger twisted into something vindictive, a lie that would give her control again. The next morning, she told her father that Ethan had crossed a line, made her uncomfortable, threatened her in some way. Her father, furious and fearful of scandal, didn't hesitate. "Pack your things. You're done here," Mr. Harrington ordered. Ethan stood frozen, eyes fixed on Clarissa. "Is this what you really want?" Her lips pressed tight. "Yes." And just like that, the gates closed behind him. 3 years turned slowly for Ethan. Each job application led to closed doors. Each reference call returned silence. The accusation clung to him like smoke, invisible but suffocating. He worked odd jobs, lived simply, and spent nights staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment he walked away without a chance to defend himself. But with each passing month, his resolve grew stronger. He would not destroy her. He would expose the truth. Meanwhile, Clarissa's golden life lost its shine. Friends faded as whispers began to circle her, selfish, spoiled, untrustworthy. Her father grew tired of her endless parties and hollow apologies. The Harringtons announced a glittering charity gala, an event meant to restore their fading social standing. Guests arrived in polished cars, dressed in jewels and silk. Ethan was there too, no longer a driver, but a logistics consultant, invited by the event's organizers. His posture had changed. His suit fit perfectly. His silence now carried weight. Across the ballroom, Clarissa laughed carelessly until her gaze landed on him. Something in her chest tightened. "Do I know you?" she murmured to her friend. He didn't approach her. He only watched. Over the following weeks, Ethan wove his way into the gala's network, speaking to board members, sharing fragments of what had happened 3 years ago. "I have no interest in destroying anyone," he told one organizer over coffee. "But truth deserves to breathe." Clarissa, unaware of his movements, began to notice the chill in her surroundings. Invitations were withdrawn. Conversations stopped when she entered the room. Even her father, once quick to defend her, began to look at her with cautious eyes. The final night of the gala arrived. The room glittered with chandeliers, but a storm brewed beneath the surface. Ethan stepped onto the small stage during the closing remarks. "In 3 years, I was dismissed from this very household under accusations that were never questioned. Today, I present the truth." Documents flashed on the screen, timestamps, messages, testimonials from staff who had been silenced. The audience murmured. Cameras clicked. Clarissa's face went pale. Her father's hands clenched the edge of the table. "Clarissa, what is this?" he whispered. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. The lie that once protected her now crumbled in front of them all. The gala ended with silence instead of applause. Clarissa stayed behind, staring at her reflection in the marble floor. Her father approached her days later, no longer angry, just weary. "Truth was always free to speak," he said. "You chose silence instead." Ethan didn't demand money. He didn't ask for apology in public. He only left a letter. "I never wanted to harm you. I only wanted my name back." He walked away from the Harrington gates one last time, this time with his head high. His revenge was never about ruin, it was about restoration. And now, finally, he was free. The sun dipped low, casting warm streaks across the sprawling Harrington estate. The fountain in the courtyard murmured softly as staff hurried about, ensuring every corner of the mansion gleamed before the evening descended. Clarissa Harrington reclined by the infinity pool, her phone in hand, thumb lazily scrolling through photographs of people she barely cared about. She lived among luxury, but her eyes were often restless, as though searching for something she couldn't name. "Ethan," she called, her voice neither warm nor cold, just accustomed to being obeyed. The family's long-serving driver appeared from the garage entrance. "Yes, Miss Clarissa?" His uniform was immaculate, his posture straight despite a long day's work. "Be ready in 10 minutes. I'm going out." He nodded. "Will it be a late night?" She arched a brow. "What does it matter? You're paid to drive me, not question me." Ethan inclined his head, as he always did. "Understood, miss." As she turned away, he allowed himself a quiet sigh. He had driven her through every phase: boarding school tantrums, college escapades, parties that lasted till dawn. Beneath the arrogance, he sometimes glimpsed a lonely girl, desperate to be noticed, but such thoughts were never his place to speak aloud. Inside the mansion, her father was on a call that sounded like a war. Her mother was already away for the weekend. The house was beautiful, yes, but also unbearably hollow. It began with a fight. "You think money makes you wise?" Clarissa snapped at her father during dinner. "All you care about is your reputation." "Reputation feeds this house," he shot back. "One more tabloid photo of you stumbling out of a club, and our name becomes a circus." She rose, her chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. "You never see me. You only see the headlines." She stormed out into the driveway where Ethan waited, the car engine idling. "Rough evening, miss?" he asked carefully. "Not your concern," she muttered, climbing in. He hesitated before closing the door. "People can be cruel, Miss Clarissa, especially when they know you're hurting." His tone was gentle, almost fatherly, but to her pride, already wounded, it felt like a rebuke. She turned her face to the window, jaw tight. That night, her anger festered. The need to reclaim control, to strike back at someone, grew like a shadow. By morning, a plan had taken root, a cruel, reckless lie. She walked into her father's study, voice trembling just enough to sound convincing. "Father, Ethan said things to me last night. He made me uncomfortable." Mr. Harrington's face turned to stone. "What did he do?" She lowered her eyes, letting silence imply what words never did. Within an hour, Ethan was summoned. "You are dismissed," her father said coldly. "Collect your things." Ethan stood still, disbelief tightening his throat. "May I ask why?" "You know why," Mr. Harrington snapped. Clarissa stood in the corner, arms folded. Ethan's gaze found hers, steady, questioning. "Is this what you really want?" Her lips trembled for a fraction of a second, but she said, "Yes." And so, under a sky the color of ash, Ethan walked away from the estate that evening, his honor stripped, his life turned upside down by a single sentence. Rain streaked across the cracked window of a modest apartment. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, a job rejection email glowing on his phone screen. 3 years had passed since the gates of the Harrington estate had closed behind him, but the shadow of that false accusation followed him wherever he went. He had tried everything: rideshare jobs, delivery services, even a position at a shipping company, but whispers always found him. People asked questions, references faltered, opportunities slipped away. In the dark, he kept a box beneath his bed. Copies of the letter of dismissal, the messages that proved his innocence, the statements from staff who had seen nothing but still stayed silent out of fear. It wasn't proof enough for a courtroom, but it was a map of the truth. He opened the box now, fingers brushing across each folded page. I won't destroy her, but I will not let this lie define me forever. Meanwhile, in the Harrington mansion, Clarissa's life of luxury had grown strangely fragile. Friends she once dazzled now seemed more interested in what they could gain than who she was. Invitations slowed. Gossip pages started framing her not as glamorous, but as troublesome. Her father had grown colder too. "When are you going to grow out of this phase?" he asked over breakfast one morning. "It's not a phase, it's my life." But even as she said it, she felt the ground under her carefully built world begin to shift. The grand ballroom glittered with light and music. A charity gala, the largest the Harringtons had hosted in years, promised to repair their fading image. Guests in sleek suits and sparkling gowns mingled underneath chandeliers. Ethan entered through a side corridor, a name badge pinned to his jacket. Event consultant. His bearing was different now, calmer, sharper. He had rebuilt himself piece by piece, taken courses, worked under different names, until his reputation no longer carried the old stain. At least not in this circle. Across the room, Clarissa twirled a crystal glass between her fingers, laughing a little too loudly with a group of friends. Her dress shimmered like champagne, her smile polished for the cameras. And then their eyes met. She frowned slightly, tilting her head. "Do I know him?" she murmured to a friend. Ethan didn't approach. He only nodded once, a polite, distant gesture, before slipping into the crowd. But the moment lingered, like a faint chill in a warm room. Later that evening, as the guests dined and speeches began, Clarissa found herself scanning the crowd for him again. Something about his posture, his calm, unsettled her. She didn't recognize his name on the guest list. She didn't know why his presence felt like a question she couldn't answer. What she didn't realize is that Ethan had already begun laying the first quiet stones of his return, not with noise, but with precision. The gala stretched on for days as meetings, auctions, and side gatherings unfolded. Ethan moved with quiet precision, never drawing too much attention, yet never out of sight. His network had grown over the years, people who valued truth and those who disliked how the Harrington name often bulldozed through others' lives. In a private lounge, a trustee leaned closer. "You have records." "Yes," Ethan said calmly, sliding a folder forward. Inside were dates, messages, a timeline that revealed the lie for what it was, carefully, cleanly, undeniably. "I don't seek her ruin," Ethan added. "I seek my name back." Whispers began to circulate. Some dismissed them as rumors, others listened closely. Clarissa felt it in the sudden polite smiles, the subtle avoidance of conversation when she approached. One evening, her father paused at her door. "Clarissa," he said slowly, "is there anything from 3 years ago? Anything you didn't tell me?" She stiffened. "What are you talking about?" "People are talking," he murmured, "and not in your favor." She forced a laugh, but her pulse raced. The carefully buried moment was stirring again. The final night of the gala arrived with a storm rumbling in the distance. Inside the hall, the air was thick with anticipation as the final speeches were set to begin. Ethan was called to the podium, not as a guest, but as someone who had quietly organized much of the event's success. He looked out at the sea of expectant faces, investors, philanthropists, socialites, and in the center, Clarissa with a tightening smile. 3 years ago, he began, his voice steady, I was dismissed from this household under accusations that were never questioned. Tonight, I share what truly happened. The screen behind him flickered to life. Messages appeared, time-stamped, clear. Witness statements scrolled. Statements that said nothing had ever happened, except a false story. There were no dramatics, only facts laid bare. Clarissa rose from her chair, her face pale. "Stop this!" "Clarissa," her father interrupted, his voice low and sharp. "Sit." The murmurs grew louder. Cameras turned. eyes fixed on her. The room felt like it was tilting. "Is this true?" her father asked finally. She opened her mouth, but the words stuck. The silence was her confession. Days later, the mansion was quieter than ever. Curtains remained drawn. Phone calls went unanswered. Clarisse sat at her dressing table, staring at her own reflection. The girl who once thought she could bend the world had now watched it bend her in return. Her father entered, his expression weary. "We can repair the damage, but only with truth. You have a chance to start over, but not by hiding behind our name." Ethan, by then, was gone. He had not demanded money or a public apology. Instead, he left a letter. "I never sought to harm you. I only wanted to walk in the world without your shadow on my name. I hope one day you learn the cost of falsehood, not because of me, but for yourself." Standing outside the estate gates, he inhaled the evening air. No cameras, no crowd, just freedom. His revenge had never been about destruction. It was about restoration. And now, after 3 long years, he finally had it.